Welcome once again to Launch Today, the podcast focused on what it takes to get your new business to $1 million or more in revenue. From marketing tactics to incredible guest interviews, we focus on behind-the-scenes insight from masters in their field. If you want to grow the revenue for your startup or business, you don't want to miss today, because today's guest is a serial entrepreneur who's built multiple successful companies across vastly different industries and just launched a groundbreaking AI device. Eric Kaiser is a veteran entrepreneur who founded and scaled Remy Companies, a successful real estate development firm, at just 24 years old, before pivoting to GlamCor, a global beauty brand with more than 85 countries he was operating in. And now he's revolutionizing productivity with Crush, an AI voice recorder that's already raised more than $50K on Kickstarter. Eric, thanks for coming on the show.
Trevor, thanks for having me. By the way, it was over 100,000 on Kickstarter.
Wow, congratulations.
Just to improve the numbers as we're here. We're already making more money, see?
Phenomenal. Congrats on that. It is, I think, only like half of 1% of all Kickstarters manage to raise that much, so that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, requires some pre-marketing, but correct.
It really does. It really does. I used to do Kickstarter marketing for video games back in the day. I helped 4 different video games raise more than $1 million, and the main reason why they all worked was because the founder had been in the industry for 35 years already, and people were, we want to buy another game by you, and so it makes it easy to raise the money. But when you've got that community, it makes a real big difference.
Correct.
So let me actually ask, real estate, beauty, AI, that's a bunch of different industries. What's your framework for identifying an opportunity that other people haven't gone after, and how do you decide which one is the one you want to pursue next?
Often it's a function of being ignorant. I love problems, and I then dream up solutions. And sometimes you don't know what's involved in the solution, and that's the ignorance. And then you just beat down that path until somebody tells you, oh, that's hard. Oh, this, everybody has a reason why it can't be done. But I think just having sheer ignorance and just curiosity will just drive me down that path until I start figuring out how to achieve what I want to achieve. And it doesn't matter the class of problem. It doesn't matter if it's in real estate, finance, beauty, technology. It's inconsequential. It's just that the guts of it have to be really interesting to me, and it needs to be potentially high profit, of course. So I think about, so if you think about a framework, is I just try to be aware of problems. And I also have this formula. I don't want to call it a formula. It's more of another type of framework, which is a 4-variable equation that I put together. It's a graph, and I rate each potential idea based upon the cost, how much profitability there will be in year 1, the amount of energy it's going to require of me to accomplish it, and how much interest I have in it. And I actually can graph that. And I'm actually going to turn this into a piece of software so I can share it with other people. But it's 4 variables. You can use it for almost anything in life. You can use it for determining if you'd like to get hired by somebody, if you're going to take a job offer, if you have multiple job offers, if you're thinking about specific products you want to develop. It's really about being able to visualize what you think the opportunities really are. And it then comes alive on a piece of paper. I use software to do it. But once you figure it out, you're like, oh, what you think about the opportunity and how interested you are may be different from what you actually do, because you recognize by putting those 4 variables down and weighting them on a piece of paper in this graph that I created, you realize, oh, even though I have a lot of interest in this, it makes no sense right now. I can do these others. And they're still interesting, but I can get them done much more quickly, make more money, and the time or the energy involved is lower. So it's a way to self-assess, and be honest with yourself about what you think the opportunities are. So my framework is 1, identifying the problems, and then 2, using this 4-variable solution to try to identify which one needs to be executed.
That's awesome. For years, I have taught something I call peer scoring, PIER, which is priority, importance, effort, and result. And
It's
priority and importance
essentially,
are a bit different.
yeah,
right? That gets you
we're really talking about the same variables even.
similar.
The
Yeah.
nomenclature might be a little bit different, but effectively the definitions are ultimately aligned, right? It's really about simplifying the decision-making process at the most macro level. And then you can get hyper granular after that. And you can get lost in the granularity, and you can go off track very quickly because of granularity. It's the macro that you really want. That's the steering wheel. It's okay, we're going to go in this direction. And that's been how I identify what opportunities there are. Later, as you start using the peer framework about which you just spoke and mine, which are effectively the same, once you do that, you become used to doing it, and you start to, in the abstract, be able to envision it without having to write it all down. However,
Yes.
I say that only because I've been doing that as of late, but I really need to go test that, because if I were to go put down everything on a piece of paper, I might think differently just by seeing it. So I don't want to have too much bias in my process.
I can definitely agree. I've taught peer scoring for a decade, maybe, to startups as a way, because inevitably when you're new in something, you have 500 things I could do, right? Which one is the one to do right now? It's always hard to pick. And so I made a little spreadsheet, right? It just scores. It's these 4 numbers. You score them all on 1 to 5, except priority you score on 1 to 6 to put your thumb on the scale and be like, no, I really want this one to happen. And I do find when I'm like, in my head, weight them all, here. But then when I actually do it, I'm like, maybe I feel differently about it now that I'm writing it down and I'm accountable to at least me, if nobody else, for the numbers I put in. So I feel you. Awesome. With Crush, we talk about how you identify these opportunities. You're solving what you call the enormous gap of capturing fleeting thoughts before they disappear. I have this problem. Probably every entrepreneur does. I've been trying to find ways to be like, it's 10 p.m., I'm in bed, and I go, crap, I gotta do this thing tomorrow morning. And I've got this, which is my book of everything I'm supposed to do, but it's out in the office. That's 30 whole steps away, brother. I don't want to go that far. So Crush, I can really see, helps with that. What was your breaking point? Because I've been thinking about this for years, me as it's a problem, but I haven't gone, what if I invested years of my life and apparently hundreds of thousands of dollars of people's money into making something? What was your breaking point that went, I've got to solve this?
There was a very simple conversation I had with the lifeguard in the pool in our building. And I was just talking to her one day. This is 3.5 years ago. She was writing and writing. I said, what are you writing? And she's like, I got ideas. I have to write them down. She's a graphic designer. She's a creative person. She was also doing lifeguarding to earn extra money. And I also have stacks of notebooks. It's all the same, right? Just like you have your notebook and you use it as your repository of ideas and tasks. It's the same for me. And I've tried to leverage all the tech, right? I'm like, I'll create an email folder and I'll cleverly create a virtual folder and I'll make sure that anything with the subject line goes in, and then I'll have a place to put all of it, and then it's not accessible. It's the same problem over and over. And what really got me in the zone of this project was that, not unlike other people, but when I get into the shower, I get ideas. Some days I'll have 20, my mind is just cooking, and other days I'll do nothing. And then there's everything in between. However, I've noticed for the very longest of time that, yes, I do get this creative rush, which is how I developed the word crush, in the shower. And there has to be some market solution to solve this problem. We were joking. I was like, I get all my ideas in the shower. She's like, yeah, me too. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go on Amazon. Somebody has to have solved this market problem. This is not exclusive to me, clearly. So let me just go there and get whatever it is so I can at least capture the ideas in the shower. And then after 3 weeks of not finding anything from real discovery and doing all sorts of searches, I was like, wow, is this really more exclusive to me? Am I just an anomaly, or is this true? And that's an important distinction that I think is wise to make. And it's very relevant to your first question about how you identify ideas. And look inward often. If I use myself as a proxy for other people. If I am having this problem, most likely other people are. What I've come to learn about that statement is, yes, that's often the case. And yes, there's a market. However, that doesn't mean, but that profile of the person needs to be understood. Okay. An Amazon truck driver who is focused on his 9 to 5 and KPIs for package deliveries and on-time deliveries, and has a very structured way of working during his day. And then after work, he shifts to a leisure mode because he no longer needs to work. And the company is now someone else's problem. His job is to show up tomorrow on time and perform. The time between that, the work schedule, the impact of forgetting is not really enormous on him. He's focused on family and getting food and going out having a beer, seeing the guys, playing squash, whatever it is. So when I say profiling the individual is, I can identify problems that I have. I am a proxy for other people, but who are those other people and how big is that market? And when it comes to Crush, that is a market that I thought might be bigger than it is. I'm not sure it isn't, but there is a significant market, but it's for people like you and me, for people who are independently responsible for their livelihoods, who have a very high cost of forgetting because all the ideas and tasks that need to be done are all related content to achieve a goal of survival and growth. Forgetting about an idea or a question you may have or something you want to research has a higher impact on people like us than it does for an Amazon driver who's like, yeah, actually, I've always wondered about is the moon really made of cheese and from where did that come? It's not a pressing issue, but for you and me, that might be a whole thread of a viral topic and we want to work it and it's not something we want to forget. And we might just want it in inventory for later and have a place to put it. Crush solves that problem, and it solved the problem for me. So I developed it with the thought in mind of, okay, if I'm in the shower, how do I record? And by the way, I don't want any complications from technology. I don't want more stuff. I don't want confusion. I don't want to have to learn how to use anything. I just want to press a button, record it, and have it show up. But can we make it as simple as that? And that's been the premise, to be able to attract other individuals who are like you and me, who are busy, who don't want to have to think about how to manage something, and they just can press a single button on a device, record into it, and press it, and it just shows up, transcribed in an app. And then you then have a record. That alone is a really amazing feat to achieve, right? Because you can be anywhere. You don't need your phone. You can decouple. You're not dependent on something. And when you're creative or when you're just thinking, most of our customers all talk about an experience when they're driving. Driving seems to be a common place for people to really start using their brain. I know for me, it has always been. I used to drive an hour back and forth to my office in my 20s, and those were the two most important times of the day. I always said this to everybody. I'm like, it's my thinking ramp up time, and then going home was the conclusion time and drawing conclusions, executing after having executed and drawing conclusions. So when people drive, they are thinking and they want to capture. They're also listening. They're listening to podcasts. They may be listening to this podcast and they want to remember something out of here. How do you do that? You don't. The point is you're listening to it through your phone. You're not stopping driving and rewinding and then creating a voice note on your phone. And it's just not, no one's doing that. It's impractical. However, when you're using a device and you're just, I keep it around my neck generally because I want the access to it continually, but I'm listening to a podcast, I can just hit a button, record that excerpt, it's done, and I continue on. And when I open the app later and I see it, I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I can elect to do more research on it. I can put it into a folder for just having it for later that I can review. So there's a real need for a product like this for certain profiles of people, and those people are those who are independent founders, owners, CEOs, people whose minds and ideas are what drive their lives.
Gotcha. I think most founders build to solve one of their problems, right? It's only a very kind of capital-oriented founder who goes, I don't have this problem, but there's mine there, let's go. Most founders build because they care about what they do. I love hearing how much you care about Crush, right? It's a cool idea. I can tell you're also really passionate about it. That's awesome. Let me ask you, though, some founders get stuck in, I see it all the time, Mike, because I mentor early stage founders. I work with early stage founders. I do go to market for, I've built $214 million marketing engines now. And many founders build a solution. They've got a thing. I've made this thing. And then they go, why will no one buy my thing? And it's because they're looking for a problem that their solution actually solves. Your Kickstarter for Crush emphasizes you redesigned this thing multiple times as you discovered the problems that Crush was the solution for. Now, that's also like, software is hard, but hardware is freaking hard because you commit a change to a circuit board. It's a big thing to walk it back. How do you go through these redesigns? How do you go through this process of deciding this is important enough to be worth the gigantic problem for me of adding something new into a piece of hardware?
Often you start with the kitchen sink. And with Crush, and very particularly in Crush, my engineer Josh and I came up with a very strict rule at the very beginning of this project. And that was our job. We have one job, only one job. And that is to make sure that your idea goes from here and shows up in the app. That's the number one job. Everything has to contribute to that. And we can have it do this and we can have it do that. And there's so much you can do. But ultimately, we keep stripping out as many features as possible in order to be able to simplify and streamline this process for our users and not complicate it. Your question about how do you decide as you continue to iterate what to add and what's of value, there is an interplay. So there's a gentleman by the name of Eric Hippel. He wrote a book called The Democratization of Innovation. And one of the common understanding, at least for people who are not focused on sprints and fail fast, and I just don't believe in any of that, is that you let your customers, you have lead customers, and you let your customers dictate to you what they need, because you're never going to see all the use cases that they have, and you're going to miss adjacent markets, which could be a primary market ultimately. And what we did is, early in the process, I got it to work. You're right, hardware is not easy. There is a lot. You're correct, and we know that. We started talking to people, and this is where the divide came. I'm thinking everybody could use a product like this. And yes, everybody could use a product like this. However, the desire or need for most people is low because they're 9 to 5 and they're worried about beer on Friday, not, oh my God, I have this amazing idea. Sorry. This should be, they're not worried about an amazing idea that's going to get lost and that could change the trajectory of their entire lives. Okay? And when you start to interview people and you start to have any product and you put it out there, you're like, look at what I did. Isn't this amazing? And people go, I wouldn't really use it. It's not for me. You start to doubt whether or not you've created a valuable product. And I learned on this project, and very particularly about, I didn't realize this problem wasn't prolific. This problem is only very serious with certain types of people. It's not for everybody. And when you learn that information, you then start to weight what the people who most need it are telling you to do. Because there's a very interesting phenomena about being presented with a product by someone you know and trying to be respectful in saying you don't need it or like it or want it or understand it. And you can get a lot of mixed signals from somebody. And if you were to present something to me and you said, look, I made this really cool pen. And I'd be like, okay, like, cool. Like, maybe you know a lot about pens. Maybe that's your interest. For me, I don't know a lot about pens and it's not my interest. Maybe you do. And you're telling me how amazing this is and how using this pen is going to be amazing. But I'm like, I don't really write, but this is great. I think it's cool what you did, Trevor. And, but if it's not exactly for me, but if it were to have like a gold nib, or if you had 2 places to hang it, yeah, I'd be more interested in it. That's all misleading. That's all very misleading information, because people are trying to say no by telling you there's a missing feature. When I launched the GlamCor company, when I brought lights to market, this is a very high level conversation, not to get into the nitty gritty, but I would present the lights to people. Some people would snatch them up immediately, and other people would hem and haw, and they would want it, but it's too much money. And they would find lots of excuses why they shouldn't get it. And it's my fault because it's missing this, that, the other. So what I learned also from that process was, okay, let me try building all this in and see if it really moves the needle. And really it doesn't. It's because they couldn't afford it. It's not for them. It's something, but they don't know how to communicate what they feel bad, right? They don't know how to communicate to say no. And just like it's like, it's not for me, right? And so that lack of true honesty because of feelings can often lead founders down a product path that's the wrong direction. So when I realized who our users were going to be, I then completely changed everything. We were like, oh, we're going to continue on the simplification, but now what we need are actually tools for people like you and me. Because our users are saying, okay, I've got the note. What am I going to do with all this now? Now it's just in a giant inbox. I'm glad I have it, but now you're leaving me hanging. I need to organize this stuff. And if you can give me organization, this can be my primary method of recording all my ideas. Oh, and by the way, I want other people on my team to use this too, because all I want to do is be able to say this, and I want my assistant to get it. Can we do that? Like, how can you continue to reduce friction for me using a device? And so that's the direction in which we went. And now we're at a point where we have a very powerful business tool about to launch, which is the next version of our software. And you'll learn that the recording part, and once you get the hardware down, you'll learn that there are other types of ways to record. Recording isn't the issue any longer. It's what happens to your notes and what happens to your thoughts after it's in the app. And that's when the whole story actually starts. And this is the gateway into a very serious way to be optimized for productivity and sharing and reduce friction, increase speed, and increase output. It's really sensational. And I learned this personally along the way as well as a user. So now I focus my time on my users. They are like me. Yes, it's a smaller universe, but they are cost agnostic. They don't care what the cost is. They just need the solution, because one tiny fleeting idea while they're driving that goes lost, that they know could be a cornerstone to something that brand new or change the trajectory of whatever it is that they're doing for the better. That's what matters. There's no, that cost is so high to lose, they don't want to lose it. And that's where we focus, is making sure we capture, and then what you do with it after that, and getting their people downstream involved in the process, because they're now using it. They need other people to comply because it's become their system. So we're still early in that process, but this launch of our software later this month is what's going to indicate to people the power of what you can do after using a device like this. And this is only going to get more powerful as we capture more of our market, and we start capturing the downstream market as a result of that. So it's a very interesting journey. It's cost me over $1 million of development. It took 3 years for me to go from that conversation with the lifeguard to actually shipping the product. And everything in between there had been these very expensive learning curves because you start pivoting and understanding what the product really is and for whom, and then you have to lock in on that and develop it. So these are not easy jobs. I don't want anyone to get the impression that this is just whip it up and we can just get something going. These are very thoughtful approaches that we take, and we're really working to make sure that our end user has this amazing experience, gets hooked, and then pushes it and forces the product on people below them. So being able to attract the CEOs, the decision makers, is the goal. So I don't care about later, 5 years from now, maybe an Amazon truck driver will be like, oh, I get the value of this. I'm going to have it because I'm inspired now from Trevor's podcast to write a book, and I need to capture all these ideas while I'm driving because I'm not going to be an Amazon driver later. And this is what I'm going to use in order to be able to do that, because it happens when I'm unloading or I meet somebody or I'm going to get the sandwich and then right there on the sidewalk, that comes later. Right now, it's capturing all these decision makers and getting them to adopt the product, getting them every tool that they need within it, and then being able to have it deployed beneath them. And then it will evolve into something more. But I have a very clear long-term vision for it. But right now, that's where we are. And we're just about to launch the next version of the software.
Awesome. I very much like something you said here. And I can tell you are fundamentally a more sympathetic person than I am, because I talk about your users will lie to you. It's actually everyone will lie to you because they don't want to hurt your feelings. And one of the makers on X who I follow, his name is Thibaut. He mentions you should never take an opinion from your free users. You should only look at feature requests. You should only look at the folks who are already giving you any amount of money. Some money tells you they bought in, even though you didn't have the thing they wanted. But that's now like they've given you that much trust. And that is a big part of validating your idea with feedback is, like you mentioned, tons of folks that give you dumb ideas because they can't elucidate, I don't want it. When I do feedback for startups and pitch competitions or whatever, I'm usually the guy who's like, I don't understand what your product's for. Like, none of it makes sense to me. And the other mentors will be like, that's mean. I'm like, no. Like, you got to give that blunt feedback so that they can ignore my feedback, sure, but at least they know it's not a, hey, it'd be cool, but only if you had this. So I think that's a great way to look at it. And I was head of product for a hardware company for a few years. And the challenges of committing something to silicon because you've been told something by somebody and then living to regret it is also, I've been there. I know what it's like. That you've gotten this far and now you're in the software implementation side of it is really cool. The hardware startup graveyard is filled with great ideas that couldn't navigate manufacturing challenges. That is actually the company I was head of product at. I inherited a product portfolio where the landmark Keystone product didn't work. They'd invested $1 million into a piece of hardware that was supposed to manage a fleet of Bluetooth devices, and it had an antenna range of 1 meter. So, oops, big problem. Everything looked good on paper, samples looked good, upon production, screwed us. You mentioned in your Kickstarter, there's a reason why Crush hasn't existed before. This is hard. Right?
Yes.
Not just the hardware is hard, but hardware is also hard. What have you done across your $1 million worth of investment in manufacturing and supply chain that you've learned about why hardware is so full of graveyards of other startups that you've navigated successfully? Why are you still alive? What can you tell another founder?
I moved to China in 2010 and lived there for 7 years until my wife, who is Chinese, told me that we had to move back to New York because we were having children. And she didn't want to raise them in China or put them through the education system, which I completely understand and agree. And during that period of time, when I launched this company, I ended up developing a factory, and that factory continued to grow and grow. And I did all the product development, and I learned over time how to make electronic products. And when we decided to make the hardware for Crush, I already have circuit board assembly a circuit board assembly line. It's called an SMT. I've got engineers and programmers. And this evolved over time. It didn't happen in 1 minute. If I were to have started this project prior to having any of that knowledge, just cold saying, I have this idea, this would have been a couple, $2.5 million project of follies and learning and time. And it would have been a totally different project. However, we have a lot of experience with hardware. All of our LED lights are effectively electronic products. That's what they are. And we researched and had to determine what we wanted to have happen when you press this button. Most of the recording devices are actually Bluetooth microphones that require your phone and stream to your phone.
Yeah.
They may save a format as well, but they don't have a really efficient way of getting it off. Some do. You can create local networks. But what I decided was I want to have a Wi-Fi device. I wanted an IoT device because I don't want to be beholden to my phone. If I'm in the shower and I hit this button, it should just go Wi-Fi. And when I get out of the shower, I should see it on my phone or my computer, wherever. So we went down a Wi-Fi path, and that opened up new opportunities for us to learn about new chips that we hadn't used yet in the market, what else we can do with them, because we were able to learn, and we focused on one type of hardware solution, as a matter of fact. And what we ended up doing was committing to it in order to be able to leverage it for not only this project, but for other projects. So we create libraries of circuits, we create libraries of code, and we eventually can start putting that together. This was a cold start on a new platform for us. So we had to learn everything from scratch, and we're still learning. It never stops, but we had already hardware experience and software experience. This was really more of a software challenge for us than a hardware challenge. Hardware is not easy. There's still one elusive issue we're still trying to solve. And we think it's solvable in firmware, but we don't have any clear data to suggest that's true. It's just a hunch. So hardware is not easy. Brownouts. There's so many variables. Just passing FCC, what battery size, how far is the inductor away from the controller? There are so many considerations, and you're right. We have a different appetite for hardware because that's what we've been developing for years. The software was the challenge here. The software was a major challenge. We rewrote the software from scratch 3 times. And
that's actually, but your superpower, your secret superpower that I wouldn't have guessed from your LinkedIn bio, because like real estate, beauty tech, owned a factory that produces hardware, now making a hardware AI product. I'm like, I get it. The bit about owns a factory producing hardware, that's not as evident, I don't think, from your LinkedIn bio.
It's interesting. I don't really promote it because I don't think anyone would, one, think it's interesting, or 2, they would probably think it's a lie. Like, it's just true. Like, how many people do you know how many Americans have factories who have a factory in China?
Own a factory.
Yeah,
Rockefeller owned factories, but not since then.
I only know 2 other people. I really do. I only know 2 other people. I know one, she makes brushes, and another one sold his company, but he manufactured LED hardware. It's how I was introduced to him, and just happened to be local to where I grew up as well. Apologize. I don't know why I have a do not disturb on. So I know hardware is difficult, and I don't promote the factory as much likely as I should because it seems impossible. Like, how do you have a factory in China? Like, you need to know the backstory a lot more. And I lived there. That's where I lived. I just moved to China in 2010 and started this. I started this company all from China. It's 100% developed out of there. I lived there and did everything and never intended to have a factory, Trevor. This was something that evolved by accident. And it was only to control the amount of quality coming out of for the new product line. That was it. It was just like, okay, I'll assemble this because I need to control the quality, not just leave it to some Chinese factory. And the result of that was customers like, oh, this is cool. Can you do this? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm right here. I can just run down the street and just get that done. Right. Or I can find that part. And then I was like, oh, and they're like, can you make this? I'm like, sure, I can make that. And then all of a sudden you're designing another product and then you're manufacturing it. And then that keeps going. And wow, you could do this. And then they keep telling you about problems. And you're like, I can solve that. And next, when we turned around, we had 60,000 square feet in 2 locations and we're doing everything. It really grew. So this was unintended. I did not go to China to start a factory. I went to China to find factories to manufacture the ideas and then return home and sip lattes on the sidewalk with Trevor and wait for the shipments to come in. So that was just absolutely not what happened. But the result was that I ended up with a factory and an obscene amount of manufacturing knowledge, right? I'm literally with the engineers every day, different companies. I visited no less than 1,000 factories. I'm not kidding you when I say that. That's not even a slight exaggeration. I used to be on the road every single day, visiting multiple factories a day for years. Not occasionally or next week. Every single day. I've seen 1,000 factories. I'm not kidding you. And you learn from going to those environments, and then you're like, oh, and then you see other people's products. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. And they're like, yeah, look what we did for this customer. It's not our idea. It was the customer's idea. But then you start learning. You're like, oh, that's that. And then you see, I remember Trevor seeing an SMT line, which is how circuit boards get assembled. I remember seeing it for the first time. My jaw was on the floor. I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, who can understand this? I'm like, this is nuts. I was like, this is so technical. I was like, I couldn't even understand it. Ultimately, you hang around them enough, you get to know enough, you pick up the language, you understand how circuit boards go together, 4-layer, who's making the PCB, what's it made of, everything. You start talking the talk, and all of a sudden you have some control. You're like, oh, you know how they charge, everything. And you're like, we could do this too. We can do this as well. What would we need? Well, we need an operator. We can get that. We know who's an operator. We need the machines. We know what machines to get. And then all of a sudden you have the setup and you're making something that you thought was so wildly technical and crazy and so beyond you at a certain point. Now you're just on that process, and it's cool. It's hard for people to believe this. You have to really get the backstory.
That's awesome. And actually, I was thinking while you were talking, Rockefeller was famous for his horizontal expansion, right? He ended up with Standard Rail buying forests so that he could cut down the trees to make the sides for the boxcars. And you're the same thing. You're making a product and you go, no one's making a good enough this. I've looked at 1,000 factories. No one's got it under control. I'm going to make it. And then you're like, well, there's a whole business. There's a bunch of businesses here. That's so phenomenal. Let me ask, you have a background in capital as well, right? Like you do investments. And you mentioned you put $1 million into Crush, in addition to your Kickstarter. I get why some startups need to be venture funded. I think a lot of them don't. Now, I'm not sure every founder has your resources to throw into this, but if you were looking at build on your own versus take outside capital to raise, how would you coach another person, some other founder who maybe doesn't have a factory of 60,000 square feet to help on this decision-making process?
It comes down to the person. This is what I've learned. There are some people for whom VC capital is the best because they need the support of the VCs. There are some compensating factors that are important. I've had partners in deals before, and it was immeasurably valuable. Some ways really good, and some ways really bad. But it depends on the person. And for me, I went through a total life and financial reset in the great financial crisis of 2009. And when I envisioned what I was going to, or how I was going to operate after that, I said, one, I'm not borrowing any money. There's a reason for that, to which I'll get. And two, I don't want any partners. And the reason why I didn't want to borrow any money is because borrowed money often is used as a way to delay a decision or just erase bad decision making And
Yes.
why I say that is because if there is a pot of money into which you can dip your hand and throw that money at a problem and the problem goes away, you didn't solve the problem, you just paid to get rid of it. And sometimes that's okay. That's why we have money. However, often those are fatal issues that exist, which then are part of the foundation, which never get corrected. And unless there's more money to keep throwing at problems later that are a result of not solving or not having a good decision at the start, you end up ripping through people's money and not getting anywhere. I knew that if I were to adopt an eat what you kill mentality, every single decision that I had to make had to be the right decision. I do this today. It hasn't changed because I'm not relying on somebody else's money. I have to rely on just what I have in my hand or in my pocket. And I have to make the maximum out of that. And I have to make the best decision as possible. If I were to use someone else's money, my risk profile would be totally different. I would be able to take more risks, or I would not see something as a risk because it's just there. If we lose it, whatever, there's more. So I attribute a huge bounce back in my life as a result of needing to eat what I kill. I can't go dip my hand, can't go borrow. It is just what I have, and I have to maximize what I have right now. And partners can be extremely helpful. So some people work really well with VC capital. I worked with partners on a couple of real estate deals, and they were amazing. And they also thought I was amazing, some of them. And they can really be a huge backup, meaning you can get access to their contacts and resources. It could shorten the time frame from A to Z. There's advice you can get. You really can get a lot, provided that you have the right type of partner. And provided that you are the right type of person who is not offended by being told you're wrong, or I have experience with this, just trust me. Like there's a certain type of personality that I think one needs to have in order to be successful with partners.
Yeah.
And I have stayed without partners until a couple years ago when I decided, okay, I really know how to have good partnerships. I know what a good partnership looks like. I want to maximize my outputs, and I have a certain cocktail of skill sets and talents, and other people do too. If I were to combine those in a concerted effort to do something together, then 1 + 1 should equal three or four. And so I started working on all of the new brands that I have are all joint ventures, and they are incubated by us. And we have a very clear way of working with our partners. We 50-50 fund everything, so there's no inequality of finance. And I've gone in and out of some deals, some didn't go. You mentioned Tabo, the individual who said, don't take advice from free partners. Is he the Nigerian Tabo?
No, this is Thibaut Maker is his name on
Okay.
on X. He's a
there's
French guy. I actually had him on the podcast a while back.
Got it. Okay, there's another guy, Tabo, a Nigerian guy, great guy, and we were working on a deal which we have in suspense right now.
Gotcha.
He's on that we met through X as well. But my advice, I think I don't like to give advice. I like to make suggestions. And I would suggest that if you are a person who has a very adamant personality in order to be right, and you need to win everything, and you are fearful of being told you don't know something, or you're fearful that you do not know something and someone else will find out, you're going to have a difficult time with partners. And that doesn't mean you'll get corrected, or it doesn't mean that you'll change and learn. It just means that if you are going to try to win everything from the start, you're going to have a very difficult time with partners. If you should self-fund, I think there's no faster way to learn about how to succeed unless you self-fund. I have a great example of that right now. A friend of mine from high school launched a product. We manufactured it for him, and he did everything right. just like you said earlier, I've got this product and you've got to sell it now, need customers, and he's gotten some customers, but he's used all of his own money, his 401k money, and he's been doing this on his own. And if he were to have taken outside money, it would be a totally different story. It would just be a failed product. But because he's using his money, he has to find ways for this to succeed. And he and I were talking the other day. He asked me for some advice, and I made suggestions. And I suggested he has everything he needs. His product is done, his package, everything's good. He just needs to know the marketing side. And he's been paying marketers, but he hasn't been getting any result because he doesn't understand the marketing side. So I made a suggestion to him to actually go through Russell Brunson's ClickFunnels course and learn about, from him, real ground warfare marketing. If he were to have this marketing knowledge, he would then have control and have confidence. And I told him, look, maybe this doesn't make you your money, but every product development that you do and every job that you take on and the efforts that you make, even though this may not end up where you were expecting it, this is all part of the journey that leads you to the next one. And that next one is where you're like, oh, I just manufactured a product. I actually have a resource for it. I know all this stuff now. But now I see this other opportunity and I'm like, wow, I can do that, where before you could not. And so I like to say, if it's affordable enough where it's not going to kill you, maybe self-fund, and you will learn faster than you would ever expect. That would be how I would suggest it to somebody. And that's a recent suggestion, for real.
Awesome. One question I always like to ask as we're wrapping up, and we had a great conversation, but I don't want to keep you for forever, is, as you might be able to tell from back here, right, I like a good book. Do you have any books, fiction or nonfiction, that you think a founder should read to help them with some part of their life?
Yes, I have a very strong opinion about this. As a matter of fact, I'm giving a presentation next month, and the open is about books on management and whatnot. I wrote a book which addresses part of this problem, but there's one book I always recommend, and it's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It's a very short book.
Okay.
Written in 1902. And it's a book about mindset. And you can have all the technical skills. You can have what appears to be amazing characteristics on paper. However, the way you think about yourself and the way you think about what you're doing is really the foundation for it all. And James Allen succinctly describes this in his book. I have it on audio and I listen to it multiple times per year. It's very quick. And it's a real course corrector. It keeps pulling you back and reminds you about what you should be doing. I do not recommend any management books. Zero. No 7 Habits of the Successful and every list book and here's what Netflix did, and zero of them. I'd say almost don't read any. Don't confuse yourself. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just reading stories about other people who are unlike you, who have a totally different personality, totally different education, totally different everything, about how they crafted people who work well with their types of personalities and management structure. And you're reading about how they architected something that they made work, and they had other probabilities which hit, and you get to read this story. And that's all it is. You can't apply anything that they have done to your situation. Maybe tiny little bits here and there you can try. No vacations, like we don't have a vacation policy. Like you can try all that stuff. But ultimately, you are never going to be them. They are never going to be you. And they all think that they solved this huge problem. And they're writing a book telling you, like, look what I did. It's like, you are not me. You're just not me. Maybe you're really good at running this type of company, but you would be useless on the ground in China and never figure out a way to get anything done. Like, you're not me and I'm not you. And so I don't need the arrogance of management books telling me that I'm doing it wrong. When if I try to do it your way and I can't, does that mean I'm a failure? But I'm succeeding. Otherwise, I don't recommend any management books. I wrote a book.
I can tell you have opinions.
Yeah, I'm very strongly opinionated about this because I've had many people that tell me, "Oh, you've got to read this book," and I get halfway through and I'm like, "This is just garbage." I'm like,
Most of these books really are basically how I won the lottery by person.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't want to buy a lottery ticket.
That's correct. It's right. There's so many variables like market. There's just too much that goes into it. However, I wrote a book in 2009. I have a second edition that I put out in 2003, which is a quote unquote management book. It's 100 different topics that an employer and an employee confront. And half of the book is from the employer's perspective and the other half of the book is from the employee's perspective on the same topic. So
Nice.
It's counterparty knowledge. It's not telling you what to do. It's just creating enough knowledge for an employee to look at a topic and be like, this is what my employer thinks of this. And
As an employer thinketh.
yes, as an employer thinketh, as an employee thinketh. That's exactly what it is. And so,
Excellent.
yeah, and I'm not pushing my book. I'm just telling you that I recognize part of this problem. Everybody's got a management story. It's like, you have your own management story. That you are your own management story. If you're not good at it too, that's something else. It doesn't mean you're going to get better by reading a book. It's trial and error. There's so much that goes involved. There's too much involved with it. I don't recommend any other books except for As a Man Thinketh. I think that's the best book of all, quite honestly.
Awesome. I do Marcus Aurelius's Meditation.
Yes, excellent. I read it
It's
last
also
summer.
excellent. And I recommend if you're dealing with founders and partners, M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled.
Yes.
Which is a book about marriage, but also it's about founders. Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll find that founders mirror. A founder's story is often mirrored by lots of people in their own personal lives with personal struggles, health. It's somebody gets ill at an early age and how they overcame it. It's the same journey. It's just the same type of critical thinking and analytical skills and how it's applied. And it just depends to what.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Eric. This has been a great conversation, and I always love having these because they always take places that they go places I didn't think they would when I started. That's what's fun about them. If people want to find you online and find out more about Crush, where do they go?
They can go to my website, which leads you to everywhere. It's IMEK, like I'mEK.com. And I'm on X under my name, Eric with a K, Kaiser.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And if you haven't, as you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel. We're putting out new content every single week from founders with great stories just like Erik here. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week with the next interview.